James.
Hold on, Peter. Hold on, Peter.
Okay.
Just let me know when, Will.
Yep, almost there.
All right.
Okay, sorry.
Wait for that, right? Oh, where is that?
You're live now, actually.
Hold on, Peter.
Okay, we're live.
Thank you, Will. I'd just like to let me know when, Will.
Yep.
Call a meeting. Can somebody turn off their YouTube?
Sorry. Wait for that.
You're live now, actually.
Hold on, Peter.
Okay, we're live.
Hey, Will or Kim, somebody's got their YouTube live and it's a background noise, just FYI.
Is it Mr. James?
Yep.
Oh,
And you just need to close out of the YouTube.
I don't think I've got any YouTube open. Let me double check.
I think it might have been Will, Kim.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to call this meeting of Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment, this briefing to order. Today, we are joined by our members of the Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment. I'll just go through them as I see them on the screen. We're joined by Senator Doug Peters, Senator Johnny Ray Saling, Senator George Edwards, and the phenomenal leader, Senator Guy Gazzone, our leader for Budget and Taxation here today. We're here because of a great presentation that was pushed by Senator George Edwards from an email that we received from Mr. Peter James, just to talk about personal rail transit and one of the examples of how we possibly, and just getting a better understanding of everything that's going on across the country in reference to transportation in each and every mode of transportation. So today we'll hear a presentation by Mr. Peter James. And Mr. Peter James, we can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi, Senators. My name is Peter James. I live in Gaithersburg. I moved to Maryland when I was 4. We have a robotics company here in Gaithersburg, and I'm partnering with my brother who's been doing autonomous vehicle work since the late 90s. He was the associate director down at Virginia Tech's transportation facility and actually built the first smart highway down there in the late 90s. So I'll be going through some of his stuff. So let me just jump right into my my PowerPoint. Let me start here. I'm going to share my screen. And go from there. Can everybody see my screen?
Got it.
So it showed up. So yeah, this is a presentation on autonomous guideways and personal rapid transit, which is also called PRTs. And I'll try to get through this quickly so we can have some questions. In 2019, House Bill 855 passed a plan for enacting Vision Zero, which means it's a program for planning, and it says developing a statewide road system that has 0 vehicle-related deaths or serious injuries, and personal rapid transit, because it's isolated guideways, basically isolates the traffic from road traffic and pedestrians, and it's the only solution that will reach this goal of 2030 to have 0 deaths. It's just not feasible to do with our current transportation system. And also, there's a goal of a 40% reduction by 2030 of greenhouse gas emissions, and 28% of greenhouse gases are emitted from transportation. And if we're going to meet Maryland's greenhouse gas reduction goals, we need to get people out of fossil fuel cars. And personal rapid transit is the only way to do that, you know, realistically. And then the third leg of the stool is traffic congestion. And a recent poll showed that traffic and congestion is the third, behind crime and education is the third biggest concern to mail earners. A trip report found that Maryland was the second worst highway congestion in the nation. And we also had the second worst commute times of about 32.9 minutes per commute. And the second worst in the nation. Smartless Charles County was worst at 44.4. So that's the worst. And then the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance gave Baltimore an overall D for its transit system and an F for employment access. So the question is Maryland crazy if it's defined as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results? So we have to look for another alternative to cars on highways and roads and mass transit. If you don't live within a half a mile of a station for a bus or other transit modes, people just don't use it. So let me give you, this is the promise of autonomous vehicles. And so you get the idea. I hope you got a tickle from that one. I did. Oh, well, let me go back. I can't, I think I'm messing up here. Well, this is a mock-up of what a personal rapid transit looks like. They can theoretically go down to a half a second headway. And typically we're starting at 3-second headways, but by having such short headways, we can have the same capacity as a heavy rail because we're moving a lot more individual pods. And so the difference between personal rapid transit and all other forms of transit, it solves the last mile problem because we can have street legal versions of it that if you live 5 miles, let me pause this, I'm sorry. So if you live 5 miles from a transit point, you wouldn't normally use it, but if you can drive it, the pods home, then this makes it accessible to the other 80% of the commuters that don't have access or reasonable access to transit. I guess I'm having, my computer's responding. I have to apologize. I'm gonna, well, it should hopefully roll over to the next slide. I apologize. It's my computer's not responding. So whether you accept Hogan's 10% ridership or transit advocates, transit's just not viable. And I said before, discuss the street legal versions. Okay, this is an interesting video that explains everything for you.
Actually, I'm not driving. No one is. So I've come to Heathrow Terminal 5 to have a go in one of their pods. I don't even know what it is. That's a pod there. I don't know how to use it. Modern technology is really challenging. How do you use it? On my card. Please touch the screen to start. Where do I want to go? Station A. Station A, yes, okay. Yeah. That's it. Just get in. That's it. Yeah. mean, this is the first time I've been in one of these. This is absolutely brilliant because it's not a train.
It's not a train.
It's not a train, but it's
not a car.
No.
So what is it?
Yeah, what is it? Yes.
So we're in a pod.
Yeah.
We've got 21 of these pods at Heathrow. It's basically a driverless electric taxi. So you've got the benefits of a car, which is you and I have just got in when we wanted, on demand. But you've got the benefits of public transport, which is you're not clogging the roads up with cars. You're not clogging the roads up with CO2 or noise. You can hear it's, there's no noise.
Yeah.
It's running on a battery pack, 4 car batteries, actually. Smaller little electric motor. And the journey that we're going to take to Terminal 5 takes 5 minutes, 2 kilometers. And we're going to go at about 25 miles an hour once we get to full speed. It doesn't stop, so we're not stopping to pick people up on the way.
No.
We're going point to point where we want to go, when we want to go, so we don't wait, and passengers love it.
And it's, I mean, what it's doing now is it is steering itself.
It's driving itself.
Yeah.
And the front and the back of the vehicle, there are lasers.
Right.
And it's using those to bounce the signal off the side of the track.
Right.
To basically calibrate it.
So there's not like magnets or rails there.
No magnets,
It's just
rails.
judging the distance and keeping that distance.
Absolutely. There's a little gust of wind, or if the tire pressure's down, it'll keep continually calibrating all the way along.
Right. You know, when you first see it arrive, you get in, you think this feels like the future.
Yes.
Because it's sort of a bit like you've seen in science fiction movies where Schwarzenegger gets in the Johnny Cab or whatever.
Absolutely. And we've had feedback from Heathrow customers about Blade Runner and Johnny Cab stuff and sci-fi. We've had some great feedback that somebody said it was the best part of my journey.
The only facility in this country is here.
This is the only one in this country.
Yeah.
It's the only one at an airport in the world.
That's amazing that we've done that. I mean, I think we should be really proud of that.
Well, we are really proud. You can see the smile.
I'm thrilled. But I mean, you think somewhere like Seattle or New York, they would have the latest of everything, or Japan even, somewhere like that.
This has been talked about for a while, but nobody's done it.
Right.
And we are the first really to deliver it on a scale.
Right.
There is a small little system out in the Middle East, but actually on the scale that we're doing it here, 21 vehicles, 4 kilometers of track, 1,500 passengers a day. Nobody's doing it on this scale.
Right.
So you're right. It is a UK first that we should be proud of.
Yeah.
So we're just about to arrive now. The nice lady's telling us that we're arriving. So now I say enjoy your flight.
Thank you. Now I'm getting out. So how long ago did the idea strike you?
Been thinking about the problem generally for a long time, decades.
Right.
And the way we started was by talking to people and finding out what they wanted out of transport.
Right.
But the dominant things were time. And I actually had a complete solution. And I brought in a whole pile of graduates to go back through everything.
Okay. Well, I'm going to stop that video and I'll give that material, but it goes into a long description of how the system is controlled centrally and how it works. But for the sake of time, I'm going to go down to finish the presentation and then ask some questions. And again, my system doesn't, I apologize, doesn't want to respond. Let's see if I can get out of it. And technology, guys. Do I have any questions while I'm waiting for this to respond?
Sure. Are there any questions by any members of the committee? Senator Sailing?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you for the presentation. And I see that this is just in the UK. How long has it been in place? And is it been successful?
Actually, there's about a half a dozen out there. The first one was actually Senator Byrd got it funded in Morgantown, West Virginia, which has been running continuously since 1975. If you Google Morgantown PRT, and I'll provide the information, but they've until this year when a boulder fell off a cliff and injured some people, they had no injuries. That's been running, like I said, continuously for 45 years. There's a couple others, a company called Get To There that probably has about 3 deployments now, or 2 Get There. And then in Rotterdam, there's been actually an autonomous bus running at grade since 1999. But So I'll run through this rest of the presentation. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
Personal rapid transit's the best form of transportation. There's virtually no possibility for accidents because the vehicles are completely isolated from people and road traffic. So we can achieve Vision Zero now, as opposed to waiting to 2030 to find out it's maybe only gotten worse. It's got the lowest transit times. University of Maryland study on the Purple Line, the alternative using personal rapid transit against light rail and BRT, and it found that it had lower transit times, about 1/20th the cost, and many other advantages. It is point to point, so if we had a grid of these in Maryland, I could hop in one here, and rather than having to get off and make transfers between here and Baltimore, I could be in Baltimore without any leaving my vehicle. So that's one of the great advantages of this system. And then there's no wait. So your vehicle's waiting. They would be use software to automate the distribution, ideally, of the vehicles, and it's certainly well below the cost. So reference the University of Maryland study, and also elevated versions of this use 1% of the land area that light rail does, because these can be elevated. For the cost of the 70 miles, the 11 billion or so they want to spend on 495, 270, we could build 1,000 miles, a network of personal rapid transit around the state, giving access to every corner of the state and to transit. And this network, for the same cost as the managed toll lanes, would provide 140 times the traffic flow capacity of those toll lanes. It'd be twice the size of Maryland's 480 miles of federal highway. And the low-hanging fruit is particularly interesting for Hagerstown and taking freight from the Port of Baltimore and bringing it out to Hagerstown and beyond, rather than using these big autonomous trucks that Google and Waco are trying to do and putting them on roads with drivers. For about $500,000 a mile, we could put an at-grade, nothing more than a bike path, and run them all the way for $80 million. Like I said, run them out to Hancock through Hagerstown. They wouldn't have to widen 70 or 81 in Hagerstown, so for the same cost of that. It provides just-in-time delivery. It reduces the highway damage. 90% of highway damage is caused by big rigs and large buses. So our cost of maintaining our highways goes down 10 times, 1/10 the cost. And it reduces the amount, by having a grid system, it reduces the amount of transfer of freight. So being able to, like I said, putting one of these instead of in Baltimore, we're talking between 10 and 20 $1 million to elevate the system, but out by putting them on the median strips, we're talking about the cost of a bike path and some footbridges to go over the span. So we could, put a very large, grid, through the rest of the state that's not that has open space in the medians. And then things like the cost and delays of widening the American Legion Bridge or putting a tunnel in Baltimore for the Red Line run, that gets eliminated because these things are so light, they could be mounted on the existing bridge structure without having to reinforce the bridge. So they can be put right away without any traffic delays and without that huge expense of widening. And so here's two illustrative pictures for that. And here is West Baltimore has very little access. The 30% of the people that live in Baltimore don't have cars, And so they have very limited transit access. So this is just a mock-up at Edmondson Village, which is 2 miles from the MARC station. So a pilot project would cost between, to run the 2 miles would cost between 20 and $40 million. And it would be a good demonstration. And then it would get people in Western Baltimore access to jobs, you know, through the MARC system. And I missed the first ask. Well, yeah, so our first ask is for maybe some pilot funding for a project like this. Our second ask is to have a personal rapid transit lottery to fund it. One of the biggest problems with transportation is there's just no money for it. So we propose, we fund our education system with a lottery, and we propose a lottery ticket that would also be a prepaid fare ticket. And in Baltimore, you guys have a B notes, Senator Corey, which about 250 merchants accept as a alternative currency. And I can send you some information, but the largest local currencies in Switzerland. And when they ran out of money in the 30s, the businesses got together and formed a bank that would loan each other interest-free currency separate from the Swiss franc. And it now accounts for over 2 billion Swiss franc equivalents. But certainly in a world where we have a $1 trillion market cap on cyber currency, which is backed by nothing, we can have a transportation currency which is backed by the infrastructure of improved transportation. And then here's my contact information. So I guess we have about 7 minutes left. If you guys, I have some other material, but that I can send you.
No problem, Mr. James. Just want to first say thank you for the presentation and the opportunity. I'm going to open it up for questions. I believe my chair may have had a question. Senator Gazon.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. James, so who exactly do you represent? A company
well, I'm promoting personal rapid transit in general, but I have a robotics company called Crystal Clear Automation, and I'm in partnership with my brother, Robert James. He actually has a backing of Plenary Group, which is, they have about 250 billion to spend on infrastructure in P3. They did manage to say that they're not interested in Maryland due to the Purple Line fiasco and other reasons, I guess. But he is retrofitting. He's done a lot of work on autonomous vehicles over the years, and they have a project to retrofit the one line up in going from Manhattan to Brooklyn, and they're going to lay a deck on there and run these autonomous vehicles. They're running both freight and passenger to replace the aging subway.
How many companies out there provide this kind of service?
Well, there's really just a handful that have deployments. There's another company called Glideways that just got some funding from Koshla Ventures, and they have a couple of pilots. But I think we'll see a ton of them coming online. Like I said, there's a Cavenue, which is a Google-backed up in Michigan that are doing autonomous.
So a handful.
Yeah.
So talk about the pods for a minute. So they're owned by who, and how does that relate to the last mile that I thought you started talking about when we got on here? Yeah,
well, they would, probably depending who's operating, if there's a public-private partnership, then, they would maybe be the private partners that operate them. They could be the transit authority, but the ones that are street legal, it might be a combination of people renting them or leasing them, similar to the e-scooter programs, either from private or directly from the transit authority, or there could be private private ownership of the vehicles, and they would just have to be certified every time they got on the guideway. There would be a checkout system that would electronically make sure they were compliant with all the sensors and to allow them to enter the guideway.
So I guess you used the Edmondson Village example because in a sense that you figured folks would just be able to walk to the place where they'd get on in the guideway, but sort of in a broader sense usage, and certainly a suburban usage, you'd need something like you'd need pods that would go home with people essentially.
Yes, exactly. And that's what's the distinction between other transit systems, is that if you're not within a half a mile, then you can, as long as you have a license, and well, in some places they allow 14-year-olds without licenses to drive low-speed golf carts. But in Maryland, if you have a license, you could drive it home, park it in your garage, and get up in the morning. And then when you got into, let's say, a busy business district and didn't want to pay for parking, or there wasn't parking available, you would just leave it in the system for other people to use, and you might get a different.
Yep, no, I get it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Edwards.
Thank you, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. James, to the chairman's comments, the piece you showed there about Edmonston Village, I think you said 2 miles or something like that. Did you do a cost comparison to how much it would cost to run a heavy rail or a light rail that distance versus this program you're talking about?
Well, maybe Senator McCray knows what the red line was cost, but it's relatively for a light rail, it's somewhere between 1/20th the cost to maybe as high as 1/40th the cost, depending, if there's boring tunnels, things like that. So the footprint, even if it's at grade, the footprint is maybe a third the footprint of a light rail. And if it's above grade, it's like 1% of the footprint. But particularly running them out 70 towards your neck of the woods, particularly freight and providing access to jobs and things like that, we're talking more like 1/100th the cost, because we're putting basically a bike path down the median strip of 70. So the costs are extremely low for that kind of a at grade deployment.
The one in Morgantown that people basically call it the People Mover. University of West Virginia has a couple campuses, and originally this was set up to move the students from one part of the campus to another part of the campus. Now I think they have specific stops. How many little car you showed there to begin with, you sitting in there talking to, or someone talking to that gentleman, how big can you make these pods? Those ones in West Virginia are kind of open, and you could get, I saw them, I never rode on it, but I've seen them run. I've seen people get on where you could get way more than 2 people on them.
Well, no, they have, they're called, they're about 10 passenger vehicles. You can have up to 20. There's this distinction between what they call group rapid transit, which usually has like 1-minute headways, and has what they call online stations where you have to wait. You can have a high capacity vehicle that actually has bypasses for each station. And the true definition of personal rapid transit is that you can go point to point. You don't have to stop at the rate. So depending on the ridership demand, but we're focused on 1 and 2 passengers, maybe a 4-passenger vehicle, because most people that travel are by themselves. So to optimize, when you get down to smaller, lighter vehicles, the vehicles cost much less, but you can go with a 4-foot deck instead of a 7-foot deck you need for larger vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. If there are no questions by the other members of the committee, Senator Saling.
Yes, thank you. Is there like the vehicles that are out there now, like in Virginia or other places that they have these types, is there like a higher demand that you would say they would probably use some type of vehicle, like the senator was saying, maybe at colleges or at the airports or things like that, that they would use these type of vehicles, or would benefit certain areas with these types of vehicles?
Well, I mean, the Heathrow is at Heathrow Airport, and they have, I think, 4-passenger vehicles, because maybe you have larger groups. So depending what we're doing, if we get the contract with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, we will evaluate each site, or actually we're setting up a sort of an automated system to evaluate each site and see what the ridership is. In some places where, you know, it's an office district and the whole place clears out at night, then there's maybe 1 or 2 passenger vehicles. If it's a place where there's a lot of nighttime entertainment or sporting events and things like that, we may have during the day 1 or 2 or 4 passenger vehicles, and then maybe at night have higher capacity vehicles. So the thing is flexible depending on the infrastructure you want to put in there. So if you want to put in a little bit heavier infrastructure to handle, you know, like going to a mall, you might have 1 or 2 people going during the week, but on the weekends you get more families. So the system is able to adapt by having different vehicle composition.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Saley. And just a couple questions, Mr. James. In reference to Emerson Village, you referenced Emerson Village within the presentation. You also, I know Emerson Village, very familiar with it and very familiar with the MARC station that's there, but could you give me some cross streets so that I have a good idea in reference to the pilot that you were thinking about, like what length?
Oh, not off the top of my, but maybe directly, there's a work center and a shopping center there. So that's where I didn't get the cross street there, but yeah, roughly it's about 2 miles from MARC.
Yep. So when I think about the Emerson Village Shopping Center, I know that that's longer than 2 miles.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it is. And I know that when you think about the MARC, it also leads you to downtown. So I didn't know whether you were going to like Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard or how far you were thinking about from that standpoint. But I think when we lay that out, I'm also thinking about like the impact from a population standpoint. So I know that the population may grab folks when you get to like Poplar Grove or when you get somewhere on Emerson Avenue. But I do think from the MARC station to getting to about that far around would need a little bit help. When you think about and I know that from a lot of questioning from Senator Gazone, we talked about some folks may be able to take it home, but I thought that you referenced very clearly and the challenges that a number of Baltimore City residents face with 30% not having transit options, or not transit options, just cars in general. So they have to catch public transit. How did you envision from that pilot for that area? Because I do know that it's a low income area that you referenced.
Well, there was a fellow out in Washington who fixed up old bikes, painted them yellow, and started leaving them around town. And he pissed off the mayor and the council. But next election cycle, he was voted in as the mayor. But we're looking at actually providing publicly available community these units around Baltimore where people can just drive them to the grocery store. They don't have to take them to transit. But I'm actually proposing for the cost of the red line, we can put in a 150-mile grid in Baltimore and let anybody get anywhere within 20-25 minutes in Baltimore. So for the same cost as the red line, we're talking about 150 miles rather than 14 miles. But just starting maybe with starting somewhere, and I'll leave it to the community to tell me where it's most needed. I've been working with Celeste Chavez, who's on the mayor's transportation transition committee, and she's basically done a ton of work on social equity in transportation. So we would look to just maybe have sponsors to leave these throughout the neighborhoods that people could pick them up and drive them. And then we'd also maybe look at having the way they do in Florida and some other states where you can drive a low speed vehicle without a license at 14 or older. So there may be a way of, in certain neighborhoods to allow even the people that don't have licenses or younger folks to have access.
On average, how much does one of the pods cost?
Well, I mean, that's one of the issues. The people that are making these things, they want, when you put in the electronics, maybe $100,000. You can buy $1,000 car, lead acid battery car that goes maybe 20 miles an hour from China for $1,000. So we're talking at an initial price of $10,000 to $12,000. We're making our own sleds now. I don't know. hold up. This will drive at least it's a hub motor, and it costs about $500, and it will drive a lightweight vehicle, maybe carrying 2 passengers. And we're building our own sled. So our target price is really $3,000 to $4,000. So these become ubiquitous as opposed to the high cost that's out there now.
Yep. I know that yourself and Senator Edwards referenced the University of West Virginia. I believe that it was built in the 70s, and I'm assuming that it's still active at this moment. But what's the lifespan on these pods and the rail that you're referencing?
Well, I mean, the lighter we make them, they may have typically, like a golf cart, maybe a 5-year lifespan, but that might be ideal because the technology will evolve so much. So if depending, buses tend to have longer lifespans, but basically they use a train control system in Morgantown. It works great. But they have lead acid batteries. The Heathrow Airport has lead acid batteries. Our battery technology has improved a lot. So in some cases, we're making the vehicles a little bit better, like they make rail trains to last a long time. But if you get the cost of it down, you may want to turn the vehicles over every 5 years just to take advantage of new technology.
Yeah, I know that during the presentation you had a proposal in reference to possible funding through the lottery. I know that you also reference sponsors, but how much, what cost potential costs do you see in there for the consumer themselves?
Well, we're looking at just keeping it at the $2, but from my standpoint, my position is why not make them free, just like roadways are free. And because they're so much cheaper than our existing transportation system, and because they don't have that heavy traffic, they're going to last 10 times longer than roadways that have heavy tractor trailers on them. So I think there's a way, because they're so much cheaper, that we could provide this as a free access to these systems.
Last question, Mr. James. We know that Morgantown was a leader in reference to this personal rapid transit, but do you see any other states on the horizon that's just in front of the issue at the moment, whether it's just from a planning standpoint, whether it's from implementation? What other states around us are already in front on this mode of transit?
Well, my brother's working with both in New Jersey and New York. The Google-backed Avenue in Michigan is, moving forward with implementing this. Like I said, the North Central Texas Council of Governments is gung-ho, and they're talking about putting these everywhere. And hence the study and work we hopefully will be doing for them. But the city of Mountain View has done a feasibility study. Many airports, the San Jose Airport in conjunction with Santa Clara and a couple of the other jurisdictions, actually has studied personal rapid transit, group rapid transit, trams, and everything. And my brother personally has done at least 4 different studies for airports and transit agencies on these autonomous guideways. So this is something, nothing's more powerful than an idea whose time has come, but this is truly, I think, will change the way transportation operates in the coming years.
Thank you, Mr. James. I just wanted to see if there are any further questions from any members of the committee. Seeing none at this time, Mr. James, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to educate ourselves on different public modes of transit, especially around personal rapid transit and autonomous skyways. We look further to deep diving into the subject matter, and just wanted to also thank you for sharing it with the public. And seeing no further questions from any members of the committees, this ends the briefing on personal rapid transit for Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Subcommittee. Thank you again.
Okay, and thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Y'all have